Support for this podcast comes from the law firm of Davis Malm. Whether you're a developer, property owner, manager, or commercial tenant, their real estate attorneys know the lay of the land, not just the law. Learn more at davismalm.com.
WBUR Podcasts, Boston.
I'm Daryl C. Murphy, and you're listening to The Common. Boston Globe City Hall reporter Nikki Griswold, welcome to The Common.
Thanks so much for having me.
So, Nikki, you cover Boston City Hall, and we're talking to you today because last week, the Boston City Council met to discuss the state of rats in the city. Before we go any further, Nikki, we talked with our colleague Willoughby Mariano about how rats in Boston are damaging people's cars. So can you quickly tell us some of the other ways rats can be a nuisance here in Boston and just how bad it can be?
Absolutely. Well, it's a pretty significant problem. Boston gets a few thousand 311 complaints about rats every year. And, that doesn't count all of the people who don't go to 311 when they see a rat. It's a pretty pervasive issue and people take it very seriously. It brings sanitation concerns, concerns about disease. No one wants to see a rat in their space or even on the street. And so, with how easy it is for rats to reproduce, it's a pretty tough challenge for the city to tackle. But that is what city councilors were convening to discuss.
So tell us about this meeting that happened last Tuesday, the city council meeting.
So last Tuesday, the Government Operations Committee on the City Council held a hearing to discuss Councilor Ed Flynn's proposal to create a designated Office of Pest Control, which will solely be focused on dealing with the perpetual rat problem in Boston. And so councilors bandied about different solutions the city could consider to better address reducing rat populations, and it got pretty creative and interesting, I would say, when it comes to the solutions they were proposing. But at the heart of this hearing was the question of, does the city of Boston need a Office of Pest Control or, like New York City, a designated rat czar?
Yeah, what would that office look like? What would their operations look like on the day-to-day?
To my understanding, he's looking for almost the rubber stamp of having an office with that title that is the point person to coordinate the city's response to rat infestations. I think the city would argue that they already, in practicality, have an Office of Pest Control. In Tuesday's hearing, we heard from John Ulrich, who's the Assistant Commissioner of the Environment Division of Boston's Inspectional Services Department. And he kind of made the argument that he already is, in practice, the rat czar of Boston. His job is to coordinate 14 different licensed inspectors who...
Is Ed Flynn low-key saying Ulrich is not doing a good job?
I mean, I think he's saying that, there's a lot of progress to be made when it comes to dealing with the rat issue. And, he evidently doesn't think the city's done enough to address the problem. And so, John Ulrich testified in front of the city councilors about what his office's work looks like. And, they're hoping to evolve to better address the issue.
I guess my question is, what are some of the things the city is doing to address rats?
Right now, one of the biggest strategies is using carbon monoxide to pumping that gas into rat burrows in public parks to kill rat infestations and eliminate them. They're also involved in baiting and putting rat poison essentially in the sewer system. But they are limited in that the city can only really either trap or kill rats on public property. And landlords and tenants are really responsible for addressing rat problems on private property. And so a lot of the work they do is also around education on, here's how to properly take your trash out so it doesn't attract rats. And in a city like Boston, that can be pretty difficult.
So I guess thinking about what Councilor Flynn is proposing here, is that something he would want his proposed pest control department to be on top of, like making sure that people have practices that are preventing the infestation of rats?
Yes, I think that's a huge priority he would like to see that office have, in addition to actually going about exterminating rats around the city and taking point on efforts to either roll out new kinds of garbage bins that people should be using or restaurants should be using. He wants one designated person to answer to these complaints and facilitate the city's response. I think what they would say is they want all the same things, but that already kind of exists right now, just under a different name.
Got it. How did the other city council members respond to Councilor Flynn's proposal?
I think there was a lot of acknowledgement that this is an issue that matters a lot to residents. There were quite a few councilors that, kind of signed on as co-sponsors to this proposal. But there are some key exceptions to that, including Councilor Coletta, who is the chair of the Government Operations Committee that held this hearing. She was very interested and invested in what the city can do to improve its approach to dealing with rats, but her question was, is more bureaucracy really the right approach?
Based on this conversation, I do want to pull back to assess whether or not this particular strategy of creating another office, in addition to the work that's already happening, will maximize our investment while actually solving the problem.
They brought in this external consultant to evaluate what they're doing right now to address the rat issue and provide recommendations for how to improve. He's supposed to deliver them by the end of the month. And so Councilor Coletta was really interested in waiting for him to give his list of improvements and recommendations before she signed on to a measure like this.
Understood. All right, so Nikki, I want to take a break right now, but when we get back, I kind of want to talk about the likelihood of Councilor Flynn's proposal getting approved. So we'll be right back.
Did you kill Marlene Johnson?
I think you're one of the first people to have actually asked.
From WBUR and ZSP Media, this is Beyond All Repair, a new podcast about an unsolved murder that will leave you questioning everything.
Somebody should be in jail for murdering my sister.
A woman who's never been believed.
As long as they think I have done this, then they're not looking for who actually did this.
And that's what makes it a cold case.
No, it's a botched case.
And a search for the truth, once and for all.
Wow, it just gets more interesting.
Beyond All Repair. Listen and follow wherever you get your podcasts.
Be careful. You're digging in a place that's been very peaceful for a while.
Do it anyway. Dig.
And we're back with Boston Globe City Hall reporter Nikki Griswold. So, Nikki, we're talking to you about a recent council meeting where Councilor Ed Flynn proposed the city create a dedicated pest control department with a focus on our city's rat issue. I'm curious to know if this has any chance of passing, because this isn't the first time Councilor Flynn has proposed this.
That's absolutely correct. And I think all of the councilors are on the same page when it comes to agreeing that rats are a problem in the city of Boston and more needs to be done to address the issue. I think where there's a bit of a split is, Councilor Flynn really believes that creating this new department is the best course of action to, funnel and coordinate city resources to tackle the problem, whereas there are at least a few city councilors who really believe that we should focus on evaluating the performance of the existing, city employees who are working on this issue and then improving their efforts and response. I think especially right now with the mayor proposing her budget for the next fiscal year, I think there's a little bit of concern about creating a new city department and adding more bureaucracy to the mix when we really could just focus on streamlining and improving existing efforts.
I'm really interested that he brought this up again. So, what is Councilor Flynn's reason for this? It seems like it's a very important issue if he's reintroduced it again in council.
Definitely. He said in Tuesday's committee hearing that this is the number one issue his constituents contact him about.
As you know, pest control is critical to our residents' quality of life. Rats and rodents are a nuisance, but they also impact public health, sanitization of our neighborhoods, maintenance of our properties.
All right. And now at this meeting, I understand that there were some more interesting solutions brought to the table, potential solutions, I should say. Could you talk about that?
Interesting is a good word to describe it. I would also say highly unusual and surprising, at least for me to hear. Councilors were really bandying about potential solutions to test out in the city to try and reduce the rat population. And it ranged from, rat contraceptives, which apparently a nonprofit is piloting in Jamaica Plain, not to a significant degree of success, as John Ulrich testified on Tuesday.
The evidence is the product works, from what I've seen, in closed populations, but in an urban, open population of rodents, it's challenging.
And I understand that Councilor Liz Braden talked about bringing in red-tailed hawks or something like that.
I think that was a bit tongue-in-cheek. I don't know if it was a serious suggestion, but she was introducing the idea that maybe bringing in some natural predators could be one possibility for how the city addresses the issue.
I just don't know, are there any natural predators? I know during the Big Dig that they brought in red-tailed hawks into the city, I'm assuming, or is that an urban legend that they brought red-tailed hawks in, and that it helped to address the rat population, but also reduced our pigeon population?
There are also all the considerations of, if we're putting out rat poison, we don't want the secondary impacts. We don't want people's dogs eating poison rats and then being poisoned themselves. And that same issue, would apply to red-tailed hawks or owls that are brought in to attack and reduce the rat population. But I think what's pretty clear is that the city councilors think that no idea is too off the wall. They really want to consider everything to address this problem.
All right. So where does this go from here? What else are you watching out for?
The first thing is I really am interested in what this consultant's recommendations will be on what the city can be doing better or what new initiatives the city should be investing in to reduce the rat population. But I'm also going to be keeping an eye on whether councilors and the mayor are seriously considering creating this new city department or whether they want to invest more in existing jobs and people who are already tackling this problem.
Well, Nikki, thank you so much for your story and coming through to talk to us here at The Common, even though it's about rats.
Yep, they're pretty gross, but it's a pleasure to be here to talk about it. Thank you so much for having me.
That's Boston Globe City Hall reporter Nikki Griswold. And that's our show for today. Thank you so much for listening to The Common. If you want to get in touch with us, hit us up on Instagram at WBUR-TheCommon or send us an email at thecommon@wbur.org. I'm Daryl C. Murphy, and I will talk to you tomorrow.